Do you ever feel completely overwhelmed by how, as a student, you have to start managing your personal finance, and when you try to Google it, you face these like multitude of different things that you need to do to keep your personal finance perfectly in check? Because as an incoming fresher at University College London, I'm going through those exact same things, and turns out that this is entirely unnecessary, and there's a way to really idiot-proof your finance management. Hey guys, welcome back to the channel, and today I'm going to be talking about student budgeting. And I know that this is like a big issue for a lot of incoming freshers going to university for your first time. And I just wanted to address it because people make it sound like a really big deal. Like there is a lot of complicated stuff, like for example, investments, there'll be savings accounts, and all those sort of different aspects of personal finance that become really important as you become an adult. But as a student, it's actually not that complicated because there is a very nice way to simplify things that you do and to just live by a mindset that will have you in check for most of your student finance problems. And I'm going to show you guys how to organize and build that system in Notion, which helps you track your expenses. It helps you do your monthly budgeting, and it doesn't really involve too much of the more complicated things. And my opinion is that you can always build those up over layers as you progress in your personal finance management. So there's no need really for you to do it all at once. So that's enough. Let's just hop straight in, and I'll show you guys what my Notion workflow is for managing my personal finances.
Hey guys, so let's just jump straight in, and I want to start off by just explaining the principles behind how I designed this system. And it's very much something called KISS, K-I-S-S, which stands for Keep It Simple, Stupid. This is a principle that exists a lot in software engineering and when you build systems, and it just says don't overcomplicate a problem and build a super over-engineered solution when a much simpler solution solves your problem just as well. So the same philosophy applies for almost any Notion system that I build. I like to have as little moving parts as possible because this is a system that I rely on to offload load from my brain, like to manage my budget. I can just offload it onto the Notion page. But I can only offload it onto my Notion page if the entire process is entirely frictionless. If you build a overcomplicated system on a day-to-day basis, when you're filling up your forms or when you're filling up and writing things down on Notion, it's going to be so cognitively intense that you're not going to want to do it. It won't feel as seamless as just remembering it. And that's why I simplify my systems, because every day as a habit, when I'm entering things down into Notion, I don't want it to slow me down. I want to be able to do it almost unconsciously. And that's why KISS ends up being so important in Notion design for me. So on those principles, there are just two tables here that you need to worry about for your finance planning. The first one is the budgeting table, which is the one you see on the top. And the second one is the cash flow table, which is the one you see right here. Let's talk about cash flow first, because it's the easier one to explain. As the cash flow callout explains on top, cash flow talks about your day-to-day expenditure. These are things that happen every day. You buy a movie ticket or you get food. All those things fall under cash flow. It's kind of like thinking about your checking account. Your checking account is only used to hold temporary balances of money. And so this is the money that flows in and out of your checking account. So having said that, the cash flow table is where you put all your spending data. Anytime you buy anything, anytime you get any new money from, as your allowance or from a job, you have to write it down in your cash flow table. It's the overall master table. Everything else in this system is just composed on views of the cash flow table. For those who are not sure what Notion views are, you can think about them as filters. When you have an underlying table that stores data, you can apply filters to the table. Let's say we just want to see the entertainment parts of this cash flow table. That's a filter. And when you have a group of filters doing certain things, that's called a view. So in the cash flow table are very, very simple columns for you to follow. And there are just 6 of them. Let's start by creating and running through the process of entering something into the cash flow table. Typically, this would be on your mobile device because as you're going around, doing your day-to-day work, you're probably only going to have your smartphone with you. There won't be time to take out your laptop and key things in. So really quickly, you just say, let's say I'm getting some food from McDonald's, buying food from McDonald's. So you just enter it in super quick. And then the next column here is the amount. This is, of course, how much you spend. Let's say I'm spending about $10. So the next one is your income and your expense. Income has to be positive, expense has to be negative. You should never have a situation where your type is income, but your amount is negative, or when your expense is, the type is expense, but the amount is positive. The next column here is quite important. These are the categories. Categories are groups of similar expenses, and I've kind of streamlined it to have the most minimal number of categories possible, because I know that if I have to spend time when I'm buying something figuring out which category it belongs in, I would just not record it down. So this is the most brain-dead, idiot-proof categories that are out there: housing, food, entertainment, shopping, transport, medical, personal, and for anything else there is the alien. So in this case, this goes under food. Comment is just for you to refer back to yourself. Maybe you should stop eating so much McDonald's. And then the date, which is just going to be today's date. And that's it. The entire process, when you're doing it, just takes about 5 seconds. So you just do it and build that habit. It's actually super important to mention here that none of these systems matter when you don't have the personal discipline to sit down and enter it in. At the end of the day, no matter how complex your system is, it still relies on you having the discipline to come and write down, your cash flow on a regular basis. If you don't document the things that you're doing, there's no way you can analyze and improve yourself. And that's the same principle as anything else. It's always important to document your learning, or document your work, or document your finance. It's all really the same underlying issue of documentation and review. Having said that, this does make the documentation part as easy as possible for you because of the principles of KISS, which is what I'm trying to bring across. As students, we have a life and we don't want to be spending all our time logging our budgets. So this just makes it really idiot-proof, and you could be doing it when you're drunk. That's kind of the goal here. You should be able to log your expenses even when you're drunk, and it should be almost unconscious. Building that habit does take time, and I do suggest that you put it on a reminder, or you have this daily reminder for you to make sure that you logged your daily cash flow, and eventually it'll become second nature. So that's the cash flow bit. Next, let's kind of move on to look at the budgeting part of the table. The budgeting you can think of as your monthly review. Every month you will have a budget that you want to stick to. Every month you will have some kind of income that's predictable, and every month you will have an expense that's unpredictable. So let's start by doing the budget for August, which is the current month. Just open up a new page here, and then you can just follow the template that I've already created, which just spins up for me my template that has all the important parts of a budget. For the month of August, every month you would roughly know what your regular income is. In my case, I'm just going to say that it's $1,500. From my part-time jobs or from anything else, you can kind of just put in what your expected income for the month is. This is done with the assumption that you're doing this setting up on the first day of the month or the last day of the previous month. The next thing you have to figure out is what your budget for that month is. In my case, I'm going to say it's $500. These two columns are not important yet because you haven't closed your budget yet. This is what I call opening your budget. So when you do your budget at the start of the month, you're opening your budget, and at the end of the month, you close your budget. So now you're opening your budget. So you ignore the expense and the net. And your status is ongoing because the month is still happening and you're still contributing stuff to your cash flow. If you look at your cash flow here, this is what you call a view. The view that I just mentioned, this is that view. And the view is composed of filters and categories. Right now, I can look at my overall income for this month. I can look at the expenses, and I can look at the breakdown of costs by each major category, which are all extremely important information for you to close your budget at the end of the month. If you take a deeper look at how the filters work, they just consist of a basic set of, this is just the date range from August 1st to August 31st. This just says what type it has to be for that filter. A bit more complicated example would be the housing. The housing has one extra filter to say that the category has to belong to housing, and it just shows anything related to housing. We'll come back to this when we're closing the budget, but let's just move on for now and look at setting the budget for the following month. When you open your budget, you have to set the budgets for each category. So let's say I'm budgeting $100 for housing, $100 for entertainment, $100 for shopping, and $200 for food. $150 for food, and $50 for transportation. These are your predictable categories. The medical, personal, and alien category are kind of unpredictable because you can never tell if you're going to fall sick in a particular month. For that reason, I usually leave them empty because there's no real way for me to guess how much I'm going to budget for them every month. And I focus on the remaining categories to just make my life a lot easier and not have to worry about guessing about my medical expenses for the next month. The monthly budget review is only for when you're closing your budget. So technically that's it. We've opened our budget for the month. Oh, one more thing. When you open your budget and you create your template, you do have to reset your month indicators. Right now for me, it's already set to August 1st, 31st. But you can imagine that if you're opening your budget in September, this will not change. So you have to go in and you have to set your budget manually to be the correct date range. Because if it's not the correct date range, since the cash flow diagram itself doesn't discriminate by month and by date, it will not be able to filter out for you the specific month, the specific date, the data that you need for that specific month. So all you have to do is just go in and change each of the filters to just be in the correct date range, and everything else will be working just fine. And congrats, you've now opened your budget for the month. You've set your income, you've set your monthly budget, and you've broken down that budget into your different categories. Now, let's look at how you close that budget. Imagine for a moment that we've already reached the end of August and we're now going to close our budget for August. Now that you've reached the end of August, your cash flow is finalized. You've already spent everything you're going to spend in that month. Therefore, you can now pull out your accurate income from that month. In my case, it turns out that I don't actually have any income for that month, so this would go to zero. But you can imagine that if there was some income, it would give me a specific number in the sum column. The next thing you can definitively say when you're closing the budget is your monthly expense, which in this case is a negative 120 in your expense column. And then the next part here is your net. Your net is your income minus your expenses. So in my case, my net is negative 120. So that's the first thing you have to do when you're closing your budget. You have to set your income budget, you have to set your income and expenses to these accurate numbers that you've derived from your cash flow view. The next thing you do is you review your budget categories. Meaning, let's say for entertainment in the month of August, I actually spent $110, but my budget was just $100. So this tells me that there was a budget overflow here. I did not stick to my budget for that month. And you do that for every single one of those categories, and you'll have a really good idea of on what areas you've overflown your budget and what areas you're not spending as much as you thought you needed. And this is good. This is a good way to review your spending habits and figure out how to adjust your overall expenses downwards so that you have a lot more money left over for savings and other things. The last bit I included here is because I believe that it's very important to be mindful about anything that you do, whether it's your work or your education or your school. Doing reviews, thinking about what your progress is and giving yourself feedback and mentally checking yourself for your progress is a very good way to review and change your habits. So the monthly budget review, when you're closing your budget, you look and say, did you stay within budget for that month? Did you actually be able to, are you actually improving in terms of how much money you're saving month from month? Or are you deproving and kind of losing control? Being mindful of these things helps you stay in control, helps you map out changes so that the next month doesn't follow the same downward trend, or to make sure that the next month follows the same upward trend. And I hope that with these monthly reviews, you get a lot better at managing your budget. So after you've done all this breakdown and you've done your budget review, you've technically closed your budget for the month. So you close the budget and then you work on the new budget for September. So the entire process probably takes about 15 minutes for you to close and open the budget for the end of the month. Now, I would suggest is doing it on the last weekend of every month, or maybe on the last day of every month if you are not so particular about the kind of free time that you have. But just do it at the end of every month so that you've accurately captured the month's cash flow data. So now you're probably wondering, where did all the complicated stuff go? Like, what about savings? And what about investments? And what about all those other things that all the other finance people talk about that's supposedly super important? Well, as I said, this is an idiot-proof guide to student finance for students. And the truth is, for the most of us without side gigs, our expenses is probably going to be higher than our incomes, meaning we're probably going to be cash flow negative. We're going to be burning money. And given that that's the case, we don't really have anything to save or invest. In the case where you do have positive income, then it does make sense to put your money in a high interest savings account and not just leave it lying around in your checking account, which you should do. And you can follow like the many good YouTube videos to figure out how to do that. But the truth is, for most students, your expenses are the ones that need to be managed. You don't really have a consistent, stable income. It's more like a part-time sort of engagement. So there's no real point worrying so much about stuff like savings and investments. Savings and investments are for people with consistent monthly surpluses, that they have extra money that they have to figure out how to utilize in the most effective way. But that's often not true for students, which is why I omitted it. And it's also why I thought it was kind of ridiculous that so many online YouTube videos, especially talking about finance, focus so heavily on the savings and investment stuff, because as students, that's really not applicable to us. Even though savings and investments are not super applicable to us, there is incredible value in having or creating a income surplus so that every month you have more money than the month before. And you should try and adopt side hustles and anything else that you need to reach that point. But if you haven't reached that point, this very basic budget tracker will keep your expenses as low as possible, and it'll keep you confined to your lifestyle without needing to lifestyle bloat or any sort of situation where you end up spending way more than you should be spending. Anyway, thanks so much for watching, guys. And if you like this video, do leave a like down below. I will share the template that I use with everyone. It'll be in a link down below. Check the description. And if you did enjoy this video and if you want to try and implement this, please do and let me know how it goes down in the comments. And if you want to follow me and see what kind of other videos I come up with, do subscribe. And thanks so much for watching. Hope you liked it. Cheers.